Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. This is Firoz Manji from Daraja Press. Welcome to Organizing in the Time of COVID.
Don't go to work. They don't go to work. They don't go to work. They don't get food. They don't go to work. They don't get food. They don't go to work. 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 They don't get food.
Well, this morning, our guest is a very special guest, an old friend, as well as a former Chief Justice of Kenya and President of the Supreme Court of Kenya, Willy Mutunga. He is now the retired Chief Justice and President of the Supreme Court. A really extraordinary history, a young rural child who made his way all the way up until the 29th of July, 1982, when he was detained just 3 days before the 1st of August, 1982, abortive coup by the Air Force and apparently others who were plotting at the same time. And he was then dismissed from the University of Nairobi job. He's a founder of many important institutions in Kenya, including the Kenya Human Rights Commission, and he retired from his post as Chief Justice and Supreme Court President of the Supreme Court in 2016. I'm a very, very warm welcome to you, Willy. Great to see you again.
Yeah, thanks, Firoz. Thanks.
No. Willy, we've seen some pretty awful things going on, not just in Kenya, but in a number of African countries in which there has been there's been a use of force, the use of militarization of the streets, the implementation of curfew, and considerable levels of repression. For example, in a number of places, we have seen scenes like this, demonstrations against police violence, and also what was interesting here is that this was a demonstration also expressing solidarity with Black Lives Matter movement in the US. So Willy, I wanted to get a perspective from you, from where you sit. How do you see the Kenya government's policy in relation to COVID? Is it going to solve anything?
Yeah, a simple answer is really no. The Kenya government hasn't really dealt with this issue properly under the constitution. The first thing that happened was that they allowed a plane from China in February, when it was very, very clear since January 2020 that there was this pandemic in China, and there was a court order that those people should be quarantined. That court order was disobeyed. Everybody thought that the government was going to declare a state of emergency, which is decreed in the constitution, and which, in case of pandemics and other crises, the government actions are monitored by parliament, by civil society groups, and the people generally. So they didn't take up that option. Instead, they came up with regulations, draconian regulations, which were definitely unconstitutional, and they were challenged, and nothing happened. And in the process, they implemented the regulations by brute force. Those who violated, curfew, whatever reasons, they were beaten up. There were increased extrajudicial killings, and in the midst of pandemic, there were demolitions of informal housing,
like in Kariobangi, for example.
Yeah, Kariobangi sewage and a place called Ruai. And of course, the regulations talked about social distancing, talked about masks, and the state did absolutely nothing to provide, resources during the lockdown. It didn't provide masks, and there were a lot of people who were just arrested for not wearing masks, and we began to hear cries of oppression, people saying, how can we be ordered to wash hands when we don't have water and we don't have soap? And why are we being forced to buy masks when we can't afford? And if there is a lockdown, how are we going to survive? And so somebody said, and very, very, very clearly, that lockdowns were death sentences to the poor, in the country. And the leadership continued, to give information about the pandemic, a lot of it conflicting, which is not surprising, since our political leadership tells the truth by accident. So people didn't get the proper information. And so what we have is a situation where people say, there are fatalities, the figures are not validated, and there's a status of fear. So in a word, I think the state has shown, and the political leadership here has shown, its uncaring, its inhumanity, and particularly when the leadership still continues in its path of politics of division, and there is, abundant evidence that the political leadership doesn't really care about the lives of the poor. But there have been opportunities arising out of that.
Well, before we come to the opportunities that come out of that, help us understand. You said having a curfew is like, well, almost condemning people to death. Help us understand how that happens. What happens in a curfew, and why is that so dangerous?
Well, the curfew, the initial curfew was, I think, between I think from 9 to 6, to 9 p.m. to 6. In fact, it was from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. And in Nairobi, for example, people start walking to their places of work around 4 a.m. in the morning. So they were bound to breach the curfew regulations, because there are a lot of people who go to the industrial area to work. There are a lot of people going to construction sites. A lot of people work as housekeepers, and they can't afford transport. They would walk, and so they were caught up, with the curfew regulations. And a lot of them would also walk back home, and so probably leave the town by 7. So that was a problem. The state didn't really do its homework to see what times were going to be useful for these people. And then when you get to the informal sectors, assuming you get there at 7 p.m. and that's when you're supposed to go out and buy provisions and so forth, you can't do that. And the state didn't provide for food or water. And that's why I'm using that metaphor. You locked up. It's the country becomes a big prison, and unlike in regular prisons, nobody is feeding you, and that is the the situation. And the extra, the police brutality around the curfew also, was totally unacceptable, because there could be, there's one actually that took place even before the curfew started. The police just found people waiting for a ferry that was late, and because it was almost 6 p.m., so they started beating up people, and of course there's no social distancing. Then they were bundled into police vehicles, and there wasn't also social distancing there. So that's some of the the real examples that I can think of, besides the demonstrations where people organized themselves very well. There was social distancing. They were wearing masks. They complied with the constitution. They gave the police notices, and this didn't stop the police from tear gassing the Kenyans who were marching, particularly young people in the informal housing, who are demonstrating in support of Black Lives Matter, but also against extrajudicial killings and the draconian measures under the pandemic that didn't take into account their livelihoods.
So to what extent the repression carried out by the police, to what extent is that a government policy, or is it just the police acting on their own?
Well, it's actually has been a government policy since the colonial period. The police force as a machinery of violence has always been the policy of elite in this particular country. Whenever there have been opposition or processions, they have been stopped. Although the constitution says very, very, very clearly that this is one of our political rights. As long as people give notices, as long as people are unarmed, they are free to demonstrate. So that policy, notwithstanding clear provisions of the constitution, has been implemented, but it has also been resisted. All the time. There has been resistance against police violence, and people have resisted those arrests. And whenever they are being arrested, we've seen organizations that have gone to court. They have gone to the police station to basically release these people. So there is that aspect of implementation of unconstitutional policy, but it's also being resisted under the provisions of the constitution.
So in your time when you were Chief Justice and President of the Supreme Court, I recall that you were never shy of being outspoken about infractions of human rights. And so what are your expectations of your successors in this situation, if I may ask?
Well, I think the judiciary, during my time, we had what we call the judiciary transformation framework, which was fundamentally about developing jurisprudence that was anchored on the progressive constitution. And as Chief Justice, I never tired of speaking out against violations and stating what the constitution decreed. And the new Chief Justice and the President of the Supreme Court came up with another blueprint, which is very positive because it sustains, the former blueprint in the sense that it does build on the strengths, does rescue the weaknesses, and deals with the unfinished business of my tenure. And I think the judiciary, I believe the judiciary is facing the same challenges that any independent institution faces, in this country, because you have a situation where the constitution is progressive in giving independence to institutions and what they ought to do, but you have a leadership that finds the constitution very inconvenient and resists its implementation and close back the progressive provisions. And that's what we now call in Kenya, the struggle for the implementation of the constitution, which is between the anti-constitution forces and those other forces that believe that this constitution should be implemented, at least it will signal a new society. It will mitigate the harshness of the capitalist system here. It will deal with issues of political leadership, the integrity of that leadership, issues of corruption, issues of national debt, and the people's participation in societal issues. So that's what the struggle is about, and I think that the pandemic has just breathed life into that struggle, so to speak.
Yes. So we've seen a number of instances like Kariobangi, I mentioned earlier on, of demolition of these informal shack dwellers' residences, and we've seen the same thing happening in South Africa, both in Johannesburg and Durban and elsewhere. Why? What's going on? Why do they want to demolish these informal settlements?
In the case of Kenya, it's even worse because there were court orders that those demolitions should not go forward. The dwellers there had sought the intervention of the court, and those orders were disobeyed. And it turns out that the demolition was carried out to implement a particular project that is a project of one of the political leaders in the country, and the idea here was
this land grabbing?
Well, these structures were on what is called public land, all right, and there are rights to occupants of public land, but it's not a very secure tenure. That's why people go to court to get orders that They shouldn't be. These shelters should not be demolished. Okay, but with coronavirus and with people gripped by fear and a lot of other things happening, that's why, that's when these fascist states and the leaderships actually take the opportunity to do stuff like that, because they know once you've demolished them, people will only have recourse to court, so that the orders could be implemented. But in this time, it's implementation in terms of reparations, because the buildings have already been destroyed. It's totally complete inhumanity and impunity on the part of a government that is supposed to obey those court orders, a government that is supposed to show that it can make concessions, during the pandemic. But a leadership that, in my view, is just keen on its interests, and some of those interests are colors, to say the least.
But what I'm hearing you saying, Willy, is that there are court orders, and yet they are completely ignored. There's a constitution, very clear provisions as to rights and obligations, but these are ordered, completely ignored.
Right.
And anyone who breaches those is left, to use your words, a culture of impunity. So what kind of, where has Kenya got itself if that is the situation, that the judiciary seems powerless, those who are responsible for the constitution are powerless, and indeed even Parliament seems to be unable to intervene in the interests of wananchi. What's going on?
Well, I would say that what is going on is what I've called the struggle for the implementation of the constitution, the struggle for alternative political leadership, because Kenyans understand very, very, very clearly that the current elites will not obey court orders. They will subvert the rule of law. They will subvert the constitution. And the culture of impunity, continues. And so does, resistance. And I guess that it's something that is happening the world over. When you look at the Black Lives Matter movement, it's a resistance towards a status quo that is unacceptable and that is unsustainable. And I can't describe it in another way than to basically say that there is a struggle that is going on against these politics of inhumanity, and it depends on how the Kenyan people will get mobilized to see the regime and the political leadership as one that is subverting the constitution and the rule of law. And there are a lot of actions going on. The Law Society of Kenya has actually undertaken a project to impeach the president for disobeying these court orders, by petitioning Parliament. Public interest litigation in this country has become robust and very useful. People go to court to get these orders. When they are violated, they obviously proceed on issues of contempt of court, issues of getting them implemented. And now there's a discussion of citizens' arrest of people who disobey those court orders, because invariably they are bureaucrats who are supposed to implement them. So it's a looming confrontation, as I see it, that might result in civil strife. But we'll wait and see.
So, okay, so we have the situation of lack of credibility, potential building of opposition to some of those crimes. You were saying earlier on there are opportunities out of this present situation of COVID and so on. How would you describe those opportunities?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. First of all, the opportunities are born out of the Constitution itself. Article 43 provides for public goods, the right to water, food, education, social security, health, etc. And there's been a movement to have this implemented. And the movement hadn't really succeeded until COVID-19, when, as I said earlier, people started demanding, the poor people started demanding food if there was going to be a lockdown, water if they were required to wash their hands, soap if they are supposed to wash their hands, and clean water and clean environment and non-demolitions and regulations that took care of their rights. And this came from the people themselves. And I think activists in Nairobi and other places took advantage of that to mobilize and organize people around Article 43 to ensure that baby steps were taken to provide food, and that has become now, an issue of political mobilization and organization, and that's a great opportunity. The movements against extrajudicial killings by the police have been strengthened during this particular period. There have been a definite resurrection of launches of transformative movements and alternative political parties in the country, or being discussed, all this through these virtual meetings, and the alternatives are being debated, openly. Then, people have realized how the government doesn't have resources to guarantee the right to health, because we are told there are only 245 ICU beds in a population of 47 million now. The right to education, kids from poor families who can't afford laptops and tablets cannot participate on that virtual education. So the issues of inequality in this country bubbled up to the surface. People can see them. The greatest opportunity for Kenyan people to talk about politics of issues and not politics of division. And by politics of division, I mean the elite in this country organizes politics on the basis of divisions on race, religion, ethnicity, clan, race, region, occupation, and so forth. Even including the English Premier League, they use that to divide the youth as well. So the these are the opportunities for people who are committed to a narrative that is very different from the elite narrative, which has lasted 57 years old, as lasted 57 years. A narrative basically that is based on politics of division, and the fact that there are 5 communities that control over 70% of the voting power. And that narrative basically says the president or the leadership will come from the big 5, not the animals. Within those communities, that's where power lies. And the other 38, don't count, except elements of the ruling class in those particular countries. So that has created a lot of problems since independence, and the weaknesses of that kind of politics that shies away from politics of issues is being exposed on a daily basis. And the pandemic has helped, to basically get Kenyans to imagine and think of a different leadership and a different society that will hold their resources in trust for them and not steal them.
I'm very encouraged to hear you speak like that, Willy, because it is nobody would say it's a great situation, but that there is that hope is being sheltered, that there are cracks that are letting the light in. I think is really important, because otherwise, it can become very, very depressing about what is going on. In this exactly the same period, we've seen this incredible mobilization happening across the United States, and in fact in many other countries. I've had people talk about Black Lives Matter, the struggles that are happening, and the solidarity actions even in Nairobi, as I showed you on that demonstration. How do you see what's happening in the US, and what does it mean for people in Kenya?
Yeah, first of all, I would say that the discussions that I participated in around the Black Lives Matter movement have been ones of glorifying, the movement's 6 long years of tireless work by, its activists. And, movements here have learned that to be successful, people have to be organized, they have to be courageous, they have to stay on the issue that brought them together in the first place, and they have to seek, global solidarities. A lot of the groups that I talked to, because the demonstrations after George Floyd was killed, there were demonstrations all over the world. And young people here in Nairobi saw them on TV everywhere. And I remember one young activist asking me, I've always heard about the African world, but now I've seen it. I don't even know why, the Black people are said to be, minorities. And ironically, in Africa, these demonstrations were kind of they were muted, because if I remember, there were demonstrations in Kenya, Ghana, Liberia, Nigeria, Senegal, South Africa, Tunisia, and Uganda. But in the public square of digital age, the social media, there were robust protests and support of the Black Lives Matter, movement. And at the public intellectual level, where I kind of had a lot of people talk about what's going on in the US and the activities of the Black Lives Matter movement, there were three things that came up, which are very, very interesting. One, of course, is the glorification. I think there are four: the glorification of the movement, the hypocrisy of the African leaders, on the continent. Not many of them supported the movement, but the one who started this, commented on it, was the president of Ghana, who condemned the murder of George Floyd, but went on to say that America is a bastion of democracy, and then of course hell broke loose over that that comment. And then there was a movement to basically say the leaders should not be making these statements because they're just exposing their hypocrisy, because what was happening in America was happening in every and each country, in Africa. So we basically told them to stop shedding crocodile tears, and told them that you were doing what to us we also can't breathe. And the other issue that is also part of the discussion is this resurrection of radical people-to-people Pan-Africanism, which again emerges out of the Black Lives Matter movement, where people have seen that the African world and the continent of Africa is all over the world, and it's like the movement back to the period after the First World War, when a lot of Pan-Africanists in the Black world, Paul Robeson, Marcus Garvey, and others that we all know, it's like that there's a resurrection of that. And I call it people to people because the states and their leaders have actually subverted that kind of movement. And the last issue was to basically condemn the institutionalized racism of American foreign policy in Africa. It's one of the scholars, Sally Booker, says that this is less well known in both the United States and in Africa, and that U.S. militarism on the continent inevitably results in the killings of unarmed civilians, and we know about the bombings in Libya and Somalia. We know about the construction of the Reaper drone base in Niger, and in the case of Kenya, our troops are in Somalia, and we know about the African what is it called? The African Command.
AFRICOM.
Yes, yeah. So this is something else that came up to say that when the Black Lives Matter movement demands the end of institutionalized racism and hyper-militarism in the United States, they must include a call to end institutionalized racism of American foreign policy too. So all those issues have been very positive. All these discussions, in my view, and I just hope that they'll go forward to have all these reflections coming out of this movement that a lot of us have been following for the last 6 years. But the George Floyd issue, this was a newfound traction, for that movement, and I keep on telling people that even if the movement doesn't succeed in the US, it will succeed here and move to the US.
Yeah. Well, the commonalities are quite striking. I mean, people in Kariobangi, people in Mathare, and so on, all speak about not being able to breathe. They all speak about police violence and the impunity that exists. They all speak about the killings of young people, and both governments demonstrate today a remarkable impunity in relation to anything related to the Constitution. So when the Americans talk about good governance for Kenya, there's a profound level of hypocrisy. The Constitution is now in breach in so many different ways. Finally, I mean, I'm sure lots of people are intrigued by the poster behind you. Can you say a little bit about that?
The poster?
Right behind you.
Okay. Yes, I got this from the activists when I was sworn in as the Chief Justice and the President of the Supreme Court. It says haki iwe ngao na mlinzi, and that is a verse from a national anthem. Let justice be our shield and defender. Okay, and that is carried in the coat of arms of the judiciary. But what they were depicting here is a ruling class that is on trial, which is this voucher that is crying. And I was pictured there, of course, as the judge was convicting this voucher and sentencing the voucher. So that's what it is about. I don't think I ever successfully sentenced the voucher. I tried to, but I guess like other orders, that particular order hasn't been implemented.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And as they would say in they used to say in Mozambique, la luta continua.
Yes.
As the Kenyans ruling elite tried to translate that, the looting continues. Willy,
yes, the looting continues, and victory is certain.
I'd really like to thank you, Willy, for joining us on this show. It's been a real pleasure to have you, and thank you for the reflections and the issues that you've raised up. I think are really important, both the darkness and the light that you're throwing on this. And I think that's great encouragement to many Kenyans who will be watching this program. So I want to say thank you, and if you have any last words.
Yes, I have actually, and it's they are not my words, but your words, which I took out of this great article you wrote with Samir Amin about the future of the planet. Based on these global solidarities that we are talking about, And this is a future of a planet that is just, is free, is peaceful, non-militaristic, ecologically safe, equitable, prosperous, which allows us to debate whether it will be socialist or what kind of society these societies in this planet will be. And so that is the optimism that I wanted to end with by basically referring to that article that envisions, another world, and that's my vision too.
Well, Willy, thank you for joining us on this show, and it's a real pleasure to see you, even if only virtually. I look forward to seeing you again properly.
Yeah.
So
soon.
Soon. Thank you for joining.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and thank you for having me on this program.
It's been great to have you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Willy.
Thank you. Okay. Good morning.
That was Willy Mutunga speaking about the situation in Kenya, both the issues of COVID and the issues of justice, but also the issues of hope. And I think that's an important starting point. So thank you all for joining me here today. This is Firoz Manji from Daraja Press. And thank you for joining us here on organizing for in the time of COVID. I wish you well, and leave you with the theme tune.
They don't go to work. They don't go to work. They don't go to work. They don't get food. They don't go to work. They don't get food. They don't go to work. 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 They don't get food. They don't go to work.